Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Hi, I'm Maria, I'm the owner of Baffling Beads. I sell handmade beaded jewelry as well as check glass beads over on Etsy, and I also have my own Shopify webshop. If you're interested in any of my products, please check out the links down below. You can also find all my social media down there. Today we are back with a tutorial because some of you have asked in the past to show probably from start to finish how I make my necklace pendants. And I've just shown you in the intro or in the first few clips some of my necklace pendants, which you can also currently get in my own shop. Here's another one with a dendritic opal. You can see that I always have some kind of coin bead or cap in the middle, and then there are rows of beads around it, sometimes with a pattern, sometimes mixed beads. Yeah, sometimes they're pretty much bi-colored like this one to focus more on the stone cap in the middle. And then on the outside you can see the edging. It is usually done with semi-precious stone beads and also spacer beads or demi-rounds. On the top you have a wire guard where you then attach the bail to, so that you can wear it on a chain or ribbon of some kind. And yeah, you've asked me in the past to probably show the complete process of how I bead such a piece. I will try to do this in this video with all the supplies that I usually use. You can also find a video on all my bead embroidery supplies on my channel. I will also link it down below. And you can also find a tutorial on the flat stitch, which I pretty much use for my bead embroidery. It's a 1 needle flat stitch with only 1 thread. I have announced a few times in the past that I will make this video for you, and I always wanted to make this video with the stone cap. I have decided to still wait with the stone cap because it will become quite a large necklace pendant, and I would like to keep it a little bit more simple for this video. So instead of this very beautiful stripy labradorite, instead we will bead a necklace pendant with this greenish labradorite, and I will make it a little bit more simple and smaller. So let's start right away. I will get my board and my beading mat, and then I will show you all the materials or supplies, beads that I picked for this one, because all my pieces are pretty much unique, or let's say my necklace pendants are unique. I decide on the go which beads I will use. So it could happen that I decide otherwise once we get further into making that necklace pendants. When I notice something doesn't quite look right, I will switch out beads, but I will show you before I start which ones I plan to use. We will see whether I will stick to it. And of course, thread, felt, faux leather, all such things. I will show it to you. So let me get that stuff over here and then we will start. So let's go through all the things that I picked out for now. First of all, you will need a coin bead or a cap that you want to bead around. And I glue all my beads and my caps to just very common crafting felt. It's not some kind of special felt, it's just the usual one you can buy pretty much in every crafting supply store. You can get it in all different kinds of colors, and I always try to match my stone or my chosen beads to the felt, or vice versa, so that depending on the color of the felt you won't see any contrasting or mismatched colors shine through when you've beaded your piece, you know? So for gluing my cap or my bead, I use this glue, E6000 Plus. It is super strong, and when you use it, I would advise you to let it rest for 24 hours before you continue beading or start beading, pretty much. So this one's awesome. I usually apply my glue with a chopstick. Then you will need to pick your beads, which you want to use for your bead embroidered piece. Me, in my case, I picked some 3mm fire polish beads, some 11/0 round beads, 15/0 round beads, and 13/0 Charlotte beads. Sometimes I also use 2mm fire polish beads or 2mm pressed round beads, and also sometimes Miyuki Delica beads 11/0. That's all the beads that you can pretty much find in all my flat stitches. Then for thread, I usually use the Miyuki beading thread. It comes in all kinds of colors, and you can very easily also match it to your beads and your felt that you're using. I usually bead with size 10 and 12 needles. I switch to the smaller one once I get to semi-precious stone beads 2mm or my tiny Charlotte beads, because for those usually the holes are very tiny and you will need to pick a smaller needle in that case. Otherwise you have the risk of shattering your beads. Then next, once you attached all your beads with a flat stitch to your felt, you will then need a strong backing, because depending on how many bead rows you will bead or bead embroider on your piece, it will get quite unstable. It's not going to hold its shape by its own, so you will need some kind of backing. Many people use cardboard, I would say. I personally like this material. It's plastic pretty much, it's acrylic. It's very strong, but you can bend it and you can easily cut it. And this is called in German Pyrostyrol. If I can figure out the translation for you guys, I will put it on the screen. And yeah, you will need to check where you can maybe get it. Probably crafting supply store or stationery store, where you can get notebooks and such, and also crafting paper. I would check there. To hide away all the stitches and also the backing, you will need some kind of leather, faux leather or fabric to glue to your back, like this. Then depending on what you want to make, so if you're making a necklace pendant, just like me, you will then also need a wire guard, maybe. I personally like to use wire guards. You can also just use wire and stick it to the back of your piece and, you know, shape a little loop where you can put a bail or an earring hook through, but I personally like to use wire guards. And then either you will use a bail or earring hooks, depends on what kind of jewelry piece that you're making. And that is pretty much all for the supplies. Again, if you're not familiar with the flat stitch that I will use for this video, please feel free to check out the tutorial down below in the description box. I will put it there. I will explain to you step by step what I'm doing, and you can also just follow along. So for this piece, I plan to bead embroider 3 rows, maybe 4, but no more. And I've decided to go for 3mm check fire polish beads and also 11/0 round beads or seed beads for the very first row. I've already cut my thread. It really doesn't matter how long you make it. You can add length anytime that you bead embroider your piece, pretty much. I usually like to start with 2 or 3 arm lengths of thread, and then I will see how far I can get with it. You can see that I already threaded my needle, and on the tail I already placed a double knot. I will then choose a spot where I will start with my flat stitch. So because I will switch between beads after always picking one of them, it really doesn't matter where I start with my very first beaded row. So I will pick a spot, like here for example, and I go from the back towards the front through the felt, and I will pull all the way through until you can feel the double knot on the back. And then we will start picking up beads. So I will pick up a 3mm, an 11/0, 3mm, 11/0, 3mm, 11/0, 3mm, 11/0. And it really depends on you how many beads you pick up. You know, there's no set rule. You can work with how many beads you feel comfortable with, and you can place properly without them, you know, lifting off the felt because they don't have enough space, or without leaving gaps if they have too much space in between. I will then place the thread right onto the felt, and I will push my beads towards the spot where I first pulled my thread through. I will leave a tiny little bit of space before I go back through the felt. And you pull through all the way. Next, we will need to tack down the beads so that they don't move around, so that they're pretty much stuck to one spot. I usually tack down in groups of 2, but because these beads are quite large, I may decide to tack down each bead individually. So you will go back through from the back towards the front, right beside the group of beads which you want to tack down. So here I am coming out with my thread right next to the cap, but in between those 2 beads. And you will then tack down by going back through the felt and making a bead bridge right on top of the thread where you placed your beads on. Next, I'm going up right after the 3mm bead, and I will tack it down by making another thread bridge. So those are now pretty set and secure. For me personally, it's enough now to tack down a group of 2 beads. Depending on how large your tack groups are, you will need less space to account for the thread bridges. So if you tack down groups of 2 beads, you will need less space than if you decide to tack down each bead individually. And you tack down again. Then you come back up through the felt right where you came through the very first time, so right at the start of your bead row. And then you go all the way back through all those beads towards the end, so that all those beads are placed on a double thread. And then you pick up beads again. You push them down all the way. So that they're nice and snug right next to those other beads that you placed. You will then leave a little bit of space to account for the space that you need for your thread bridges. In this case, I only leave pretty much 1 millimeter of space. And then you pull through again. And you start tacking down. Again, I will go for groups of 2 because this part is pretty much straight. You don't really need to place each bead individually. They will align just nicely. So I come up right next to the cap, in between that last group of 2 beads and the next 11-0 bead. You will push towards the cap and then you go back through that felt. Then you come back up with your needle after that next group of 2 beads. You pull through, you press down towards the cap and you make another thread bridge above that thread with all those beads on it, and you pull through. There's a little bit of space left, that's why I will place the last 2 beads individually by placing another thread bridge. Then we want to have these new beads also on a double thread, so we will come back up at some point where you already placed double thread, and you will go back towards the end of that bead row by going through all those beads. And you pick up beads again and you repeat until you are done pretty much with your first bead row. Now you can see that I still have quite a spot left for that, so that I can finish that first bead row. But because we don't exactly know how well the remaining beads will fit in there, I usually pick up more beads than I would usually do, you know, so that if there are larger gaps in here because we don't have quite the bead that will fit, then you can space out the gaps all over all the beads that you will add into this gap. So the fewer beads that you will have where you can distribute space which you can't fill, the harder it will be to make it even, you know, and uniform. So let's see how many we could possibly fit. Okay, so this looks promising. You can see that we have quite the gap there still. So what I would do is I would try to find a slightly smaller bead. You know, like you can see here, you can see that one is a little bit shorter than the other one, so I will pick the shorter one. And also another 11/0. Maybe you can even find a slightly thinner 11/0, and then we will check again. Like this. So there's probably even some space left. It may be easier to do if you find a bead which is not quite as long as maybe that one, you know, like this instead, which I will go for. Because what you don't want to happen is that beads don't have enough space on the thread that they're placed on, because then your flat stitch actually won't be flat because you will get bumps in it. And now there's a little bit more space, just because we switched out one of those beads. And then instead of going through the felt, you will just continue on through the start of that bead row, so that you can connect your beads right away, like this. Looks promising, right? And you will go back down, and then you come back up and you will start tacking down your bead groups again. And then you just go back again through all those beads that you added last. And there you have your very first bead row. So then I will usually continue with using smaller beads towards the outside or the outer rows of this pendant. So I've already decided to switch it up a little bit and to go with other beads that I had first chosen. So I will not use these 1501s in a yellow tone, and instead I will add 2mm fire polished beads. In case you're ever looking for 3mm, 4mm, 2mm fire polished beads, you can find those in my bead shop. So and what I want to do next is I want to place those 2mm fire polished beads right on top of those 11/0 seed beads, and in between I want to place those 15/0 seed beads. So let's start here. I will come up very close to that first bead row that I placed, and then I will start by picking up one of those 2mm beads, and then I will continue on with 3 15/0s, and I will pick up another 2mm bead. And now I will need to check whether those beads will fit. Like this. It's a very tight fit. I will probably need to find some smaller beads in between. Maybe it's even easier if you space it out a little bit so you pick up more beads than just for the first part or that first arch that you want to bead. You know, like this, and you can also see better how it will look in the end. Let's go for it. I won't leave much space because I really don't have much space. And then I will tack down the very first bead here right at the end, so that I can make sure that it's placed right on top of that 11-0 bead. Right there where you want it. You can already see that these beads are trying to escape and gain more space. So because they want more space, you want to place those little arches on top of that bulkier 3mm bead. And what I will do here is that I will tack down one bead and groups of 3 beads, because I know exactly where I want to place those 2mm beads, and the 15-0 beads, they can make their little arches, you know? Doesn't really bother me, but I want to place those 2mm beads in the right spot. You need to adjust your beads a little bit, and then you tack them down. And this is how I will bead the second row. Again, you go up right where you started that bead row, and then you go back through all those beads so that they are then on a double strand. And then you will pick up beads again. This time I picked up enough beads for 3 arches on top of those 3mm beads. You can see that we have a little bit more space here because of the curve of that cap. So you adjust your beads right where you want them, and then you start tacking them down. just like I connected those both ends last time. Again, I picked up all my beads and then I go with my needle through the start of that second bead row and I pull, and now I will need to tack down those last few groups of beads. So let's do that. So here's the first loose one of those 2mm beads. I will need to align it as best as I can with that 11/0 seed beads down here. We'll push close towards the first bead row. And then you want to push that 2mm bead a little bit closer to that 11/0. Second row is done. I will now switch over to my 13/0 Charlotte beads, and that means that I will need a slimmer needle. I will stick to just that one bead type for that outer row to not overcomplicate the design, because the edging I will make that one with demi-rounds and semi-precious stone beads, so I want to have at least one very simple row. It's glittery because Charlotte beads are faceted. Those green beads, they actually don't have exactly the same color, so there is a little bit of variation in there, which is fine for me in this case. So I will pick up a few. You can count them if you like, maybe pick up 6 or 8. I just pick up as many as I feel like. Then I will again place that thread pretty much on top of that felt, pull tight. I will push the beads towards the spot where I came through that felt, and then I will leave a little bit of space for the thread for tagging down beads. You go through that felt and you will start tagging down beads again. I will go with groups of 2 this time. there we have it. The main part is done. I won't bead more than 3 rows for this necklace pendant. So that means that I will now cut it out. I still have enough thread left to do the edging, so I won't need to add any new thread. If your thread is too short, you will just need to tie some knots with the remaining working thread, cut it off, and then you will get a new piece of thread ready. Just cut a piece maybe of 1 arm length or maybe 1.5, depending on how large your necklace pendant will be. You will again tie a double knot and you will just pull through from the back towards the front, somewhere in between those bead rows, you know, and then you have a new working thread that you can work with. But for now, I will cut out this piece. I will leave a little bit of space around it so that it's not super close and so that you don't run the risk of cutting any of your threads on the back, because that would unravel the whole piece. Okay, and then we will glue it to the backing, this one. So let's do that so that we then can continue with beading tomorrow. Make sure to not cut off your working thread while you cut this one out. And as I said, please leave a little bit of space next to the pendant. It's probably not even 1 millimeter. Maybe it is 1, but definitely not more. And be very careful about it. Like this. You can now use this leftover piece to draw the shape on this acrylic sheet. This is the whole shape of the necklace pendant, and you want to leave a little bit of space so that you can then use the space to bead the edge. No? So instead of gluing the whole piece, I leave about maybe 5 millimeters of space so that I can still poke my needle through and add an edging to the piece. Let's check it. I'd say it's a little bit too wide. No, it's pretty good. Spread it out evenly. And then you place it on the back and you press down. I will let this one rest for a little bit, maybe an hour or two, and then I will also glue the faux leather. I usually put some softer fabric in between the stone and the plate so that it doesn't get scratched. I have some smaller slate plates here and I just place them on top for a little while. And next I can get a piece of my faux leather ready. So it will be this big. Let's see. I can place it best. I guess I will just go for this piece. Like that. And then there will be enough space to place it on the backing. Okay. So I will wait for 2 or 3 hours and I will glue this piece on the back of that necklace pendant so that then tomorrow it will be cured properly. See you tomorrow. Hello, hello, I'm back. It's the next day and we can continue with our pendant. So as you can see, I glued the back, the complete back yesterday, so the middle part and the faux leather. It's all stuck, it's rested, and I think it rested for like maybe 20 hours or so. So yeah, it's all nice and secure and we can now continue with the edging. So for the edging, I really love to combine faceted beads made of stone. So for this one I picked light green garnet or garnet, whatever you call it, I don't know. Then 11/0 demi rounds from Toho. And also some 15/0 Miyuki round beads. And then I have my wire guard here and a bail, both made of 14K gold filled material. And so let's put these on the mat. And because I'm using 2mm semi-precious stone beads, I'll probably need to stick to my thinner needle. So this is a thicker one. I will need to switch it out. Otherwise, I may shatter the stone beads because those usually have pretty small holes. Okay, so next we will need to cut this out. I'll just follow along the line of that felt there so that they align properly, both the felt and the faux leather. Pay attention to your thread again so that you don't cut it off. Okay, so right now we're coming out of in between both those layers. So first we want to go towards the back. And we want to do it in such a way that we can pretty easily place the wire guard right on top, you know, in the middle, so that it's central of your pendant. So in order for me to do this, I usually account for enough space to place one bead group on the left hand side of that wire guard. Then I need 3 15/0 beads to place the wire guard, and then I will be able to continue on with my edging. So what I will do now is, instead of going right through the back here in this position, I will move further along towards the top of the pendant. So in order for me to place the wire guard in the middle, I will need 1 15/0 bead around here, this space. So I will account for a little bit of space for a group of 3 demi rounds, which should make me come out about in this, maybe in this space, no, in this spot. So we will do that now. Don't leave too little space for your faux leather. You want a little bit of distance, you know, towards the cut. So now I'm here. I'm coming out of the back and I'm in this spot. So we will now do the edging. I call it with a modified brick stitch. Other people have other names for it. It's pretty much a brick stitch, just that your base isn't beads or a finding, but instead it's fabric and faux leather, but it works the same way. So for a modified brick stitch, how I call it, I will pick up a 15/0 bead, then a group of 3 demi rounds and another 15/0 bead, so that I have 5 beads on my needle. And then I will want to place the last 15/0 pretty much on top of the 3mm bead, so that I can place another 2 15/0 beads right on top, you know. So let me show you what I mean. So I go at an angle through both layers, you know. I leave space to where the faux leather ends pretty much, so that it doesn't rip under a little bit of tension. And I go through it at an angle so that I don't come out in between those bead rows, but instead right behind that last bead row, so that I don't pull those beads out of place. So you pull your needle through, you adjust your beads so that they can sit on top of your layers. And you stop them from moving around by placing your finger there. And just like with any other brick stitch, you go back up through that last 15/0 bead. You adjust them a little bit. They can be a little bit loose because you will place them where you want them when you're all the way around. And this is the first group of beads. I will now add 2 more 15/0 beads. So I pick up one. I go back through both layers from the back towards the front at an angle again, so that you're coming out behind that last bead row, not in between. And you're going up again. You place your finger so that your bead doesn't move towards the back, but stays on top of that layers. You pull tight. Then you place another one, pick up one, again, with a little bit of distance, and at an angle you will go through both layers. You pull through, you place your finger again, and then you position your bead. And you can see that we are pretty much on top of that pendant. Next I will place my wire guard. So for this, please check whether both sides match with the distance of your 15-0 beads. Looks okay to me. So I will skip the center bead of that group of 3 beads. So you will place your wire guard like this, and then you will just go through the other end and through that first 15-0 bead of that bead group of 3. You will go towards the front. Readjust your wire guard if it needs it, if it's wonky or anything, and then you will go from the front towards the back through both layers, and you want to come out in the same area of that spot where you first went through, you know, from the back towards the front. And you pull through, tighten it a little bit, and then you turn it over and you go back up through both the bead and the wire guard. Pull tight, and then you go through the wire guard and the bead again on the other side. You stay at the front. Always pay attention to your thread. You want it to be placed right on that arch of your wire guard. Then again you go from the front towards the back through both layers, and you try to go through and you try to reach the same spot where you first went through, so that your back doesn't look too wild, you know, with all the stitches. Then you turn it over again, but this time you only go back up through that bead. Like this. And you pull tight. And you've added your wire guard. And then we will continue by adding our edging. So next I will pick up again 3 demi rounds and 1 15-0 round bead. Then I estimate the space so that those beads can neatly sit next to each other on that edge. And again you go from the back towards the front through both layers at an angle, and you come out right behind that last bead row. You pull through, you go back up through that 15-0 bead, and you will pull tight. You adjust your beads so that they're sitting right on that edge, quite snug and just in the way you want them to. Should you notice that you left too much space or too little space and they look wonky, you can always go back, just pull off your needle, pull those beads out and try again. No? Okay, so just the way that I usually do it, I will now pick up one of those tiny stone beads, another 15-0. Again, we will estimate the space that this needs. It's a little less space than for the group of 3 demi rounds. And again, you go through both layers. Up again through that 15-0 seed bead. And you place it. Then I pick up 3 demi rounds again. I leave more space than for that stone bead. I go through both layers, up again, roulette 15-0. I pull tight, I pull that central bead a little bit towards outside, away from the pendant, so that it shapes or forms this little peak. I pick up another stone bead, another 15-0, leave a little bit of space, and we go through both layers at an angle. Up again, and this will be how it looks. And now we will just continue with this. By now I'm almost done with the complete edging. So to figure out the right spacing of my bead groups so that I don't have any gaps left up here, I will focus on the other side that I already did, and I will check whether those placed beads are about in the right spot on the opposite side, so that I can figure out whether I need to adjust my bead groups to more space or a little bit less space, okay, so that it evens out by the end of it. So I've now got a group of 3 beads here, and I've got 1 here. So this sits a tiny little bit lower than this one. That tells me that the next bead needs a little bit more space so that it evens out, you know? So I will pick up one of my semi-precious stone beads, and I will try to give it a little bit more space than I usually would. Looking pretty good. I will now add 4 more groups of beads. So 2 of those demi-rounds and then 2 single beads. Now you really need to be considerate of the space that you have left. And try to space out all the remaining space between all those beads that you still need to add. So I now have this little bit of space left for 3 more additions to that bead row. So I will now probably take up a little bit smaller semi-precious stone beads, but not the tiny ones. So let's see, maybe this one. will account for a little bit of space for this single bead. Like so. And I pick up another 3 demi rounds, 1/15. And then by adding the next bead, we will then need to connect both the end and the start of the edging. So we now only pick up a smaller stone bead, if I can find the hole of this teeny tiny little bead, like this. And we will now connect both ends by going down through that very first 15-0. Then we go right through that spot where we first came out with our needle, so that we could add the very first group of beads. So right at that spot again, and you go towards the front at an angle. Well, that worked out great. So anyway, I wanted to pass below that thread bridge here now, so that I can easily go up with that bead right on those 2 layers, so that I can connect the edging. Look at that mess. Right at the end, but anyway, okay. And this is pretty much almost done. We only need to secure the thread now. Yeah, pretty neat, I would say. So, I will now want to place knots again. So for this I will pass through this group of beads, then I will pass through the wire guard again, I will pass through this group of beads, and then I will start placing knots, because I don't want any knots in the area of my wire guard, and I don't want to go back, because then there's too much pressure on these few beads, because we will then come from this direction, pass through this single bead, and then we pull everything in this direction again. So instead I want to have all this tension along this side. So for this I will pass through those demi rounds, then I will go through this 15-0 right below that wire guard. You will go from the front towards the back again. Make sure to come out of that spot where you came through the first few times with your thread and needle. And then we pass through that 15-0 and that wire guard again. And the same way you will do it on the other side. Pass through the wire guard and the 15-0 bead. Sorry that my fingers are in the way, but I have to hold everything in place, Then you will pass from the front towards the back again. You will come out right at that spot where you came out the first few times, and then you will only pass through that 15-0 again. Just the same way we did the first time. Okay, and now you have even 3 times the thread on this wire guard. So very secure. Then we will pass through those 3 demi-rounds in my case, or well, your beads, whatever you place there. And now I will continue going from the front towards the back. So I will pass through that 15-0 right on those 2 layers. I will pass through both layers from the front towards the back. And now I will place my knots. So for this I will use those thread bridges again that you see on the back of your piece, like this. You will make a little loop and you will tie a simple knot. You pull it towards that 15-0 and then you go back up through that 15-0 and you pull your knot right into that 15-0. And again, turn it over, you go through that next group of beads or single bead, then you go back down through that 15-0. And from the front you go through both layers towards the back. Again, you will make use of that thread bridge. Tie a simple knot. You pull it towards the edge and then you go back up through that 15-0 and you pull that knot right in. We'll pass through the next beads. And I will place a 3rd knot. It's going to be the final one. Like that, and then I will pass through the next bead. I will then stay at the back. I will go through the next 15-0 again on the back. I will make a few turns or wraps around that thread bridge on the back. And then I will pass through that same spot where I came out at some point, and I will just pull through my thread somewhere in between all those bead rows, pull tight, and then you cut your thread close to all those beads. And there we have it, another necklace pendant. I will now also add the bail, open it a little bit. I just push it open very slightly. Put it in, and close it up again, and there it is. I'll probably pick out a pretty light colored ribbon for this one. Yeah, very pleased with this one. I'm always a little nervous when I make tutorials of a whole piece because, you know, maybe you're just concentrating or focusing too much on the video and too little on the piece, and then you make some stupid mistake. But I think everything's okay with this one. Turned out very nicely. I love green personally. And that stone cap is super awesome. Sorry if I'm looking a little bit destroyed. It's because of my work day. So yeah, here it is. Let me know what you think, whether you will try to make yourself a set of earrings, maybe a brooch, maybe a necklace pendant, maybe some hair accessory. I'd say you can do all kinds of things with these techniques that are all combined in this tiny little piece. I enjoy the flat stitch very much. I love beading edges and it's so rewarding. Yeah, another piece for the next shop update. So yeah, thank you as always so much for leaving your feedback and your requests for certain videos or tutorials. I really do try to follow up. Time is tight, so it may take a little while until I get around to do it, but I would really like to help you guys out. If you have any questions and if I can help, that's awesome. I'll probably not be able to help with everything because I personally don't use all the beading techniques that are out there. I certainly do have my favorites to which I come back to. I enjoyed this one very much. I really do hope that you also liked following along. I know the color combination brown and green isn't for everyone, but you know, you can pick your own colors. It will look very nicely in the end when you figured out which beads you really like to use for such projects. That is it for now. I don't think that there's anything else to tell you. If you have questions, if there were things that I didn't answer and that came to your mind, please use the comment section. I will read all your comments. I'll probably won't be able to answer them right away. Sometimes I need a week or two, sometimes 3, I'm sorry. But if I don't answer, you know, just ask again and I will remember and I will answer. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for sticking around, for watching my tutorials and vlogs. If you like this video, please leave a like. As I said before, maybe leave comments, feedback, questions. And if you want to see more in the future, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much. I will see you very soon. And until then, bye.